from the vault, high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Talking Catholic. I'm Jen Morrow, and with me today is Mike Walsh.
Hi, Jen. How are you?
I'm good. I just noticed my cadence was a little different on this intro, probably because it's 9 in the morning.
Yeah, sure. I was actually going to tell our listeners that. I said, I have no idea how this is going to go, because I think this is now officially the earliest I've ever recorded one of these podcasts. Mm-hmm. And as you well know, as all my colleagues know, I am not to be trifled with before 10 a.m. But to help make things a little easier on our guest, who has a full workday ahead of him, we decided to record a little early today, which is, I've never seen the vault at 9 a.m. It's somewhat brighter. It's really kind of weird.
Do you have your coffee?
I do have my coffee. Made sure I got in there early enough to whip up, I forget what Keurig. Oh, a Lavazza. It's one of the Lavazza pods. So I'm feeling extra, snobby today.
As well you should.
So, yes.
As the podcast goes on, like every time I look over you, like you're wearing even a nicer suit and then a cigarette pops out. Like,
right.
That's the whole thing.
I'll be in a top hat in no time. So anyway, it's yes, we're recording on the Thursday before this episode airs. There's an Eagles game tonight, but I will let everyone know that if you follow me on the socials, which I'm sure some of you do, some of you might, easiest to find me at Mike Walsh PR on Instagram. You will have seen
the snobby has already kicked in.
Wait, why is that snobby?
I'm drinking Lavazza coffee, and you can find me at Mike Walsh PR.
You can. Then the PR stands for public relations. Not that I'm Puerto Rican. That's the deal.
Anyway, Eagles.
Yes. So anyway, the Eagles game is tonight. I'm very excited about it. However, I was down in Dallas this weekend, which is only relevant to this conversation because I didn't realize until I mentioned it to you like a week before I left that Arlington is your old stomping grounds, mm-hmm. and you and your uncle gave me a ton of great information about all the places we need to utilize while we're down in Arlington, which I got to tell you, I don't remember exactly who came up with it, but the fact that we were able to park at Jay Gilligan's and then for free and then walk to the stadium, which is about a mile away, was fantastic.
Yep, that's my aunt and uncle. So I grew up in Arlington, and when you came in, you had said months ago that you were going there, mm-hmm. and I just put it in the back of my mind, waiting to get closer. And then I texted my aunt and uncle. My uncle is a professional eater, and the fact that he loves food. He also weighs, 150 pounds, if I had to guess. He is tall and skinny, and I know it's not fair.
No. The best eaters are the skinny ones.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, those metabolisms. God bless them.
So he is, So as soon as I knew where you were going to be located, because you actually stayed in Fort Worth.
Stayed in Saginaw, technically.
Oh.
My niece is in Fort Worth, and we visited with her a lot, and Fort Worth was very nice. Mm-hmm. But, then we went to Saginaw, and then we went to Arlington. I mean, that whole area. Listen, I've only been to San Antonio. I'm going to highly recommend those of you who are Eagles fans the next year when the Eagles are in Dallas, go stay the weekend. It is the cleanest place I've ever seen. Nicest people I've been around in all my travels. Food was fantastic. Traffic was not terrible. Flying in was easy. Flying out was easy. I think the Dallas-Fort Worth area should be a destination location for folks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was so stupid because what I didn't realize that you went to University of Texas at Arlington, right?
Yep.
What I didn't realize was TCU is in Fort Worth, and they had a home game on Saturday night, and had we thought about it, we would have done it at a twofer and gone to a TCU game Saturday night and then the Cowboys-Eagles game.
That would have been pretty cool.
That would have been cool.
Yeah, it was a little, it was actually pretty awesome for me to follow you at Mike Walsh PR on Instagram and see all your photos, because I was like, yeah, I walked there, I've seen that, because I grew up in that whole area. You went to the stockyards and saw the steers, which is so cool.
It is very cool.
And it was a little creepy though, because I was like, oh my gosh, I've been to all those places. Jay Gilligan's, where you left your car to go to the game. I've spent many a college evening there. Actually, that was the journalism hangout. So we would go there after deadline and stuff like that. Okay. Yeah. So it was pretty cool though. But yeah, so if anybody wants to go to Arlington or Fort Worth and needs some good recommendations, you can email Talking Catholic, and I'll hook you up with my Uncle Dan. He is the
Your Uncle Dan's the man.
Yeah, he really is.
We went to Himes, which was one of his recommendations. He gave us a ton of recommendations.
Yeah.
I anticipated that we would hit like almost all of them. However, we were overscheduled, and I only made it to one of the locations. But that Himes I guess it was in Arlington we went to.
Fort Worth.
That was great. Some of the best brisket I've ever had in my entire life.
Your picture, you sent this picture, Mike sent this picture, and it was just like a meat with a side of meat. And I was like, what are you eating?
That's right.
And rolls. And then I was like, actually, there's nothing wrong with that. I see nothing wrong with that.
It was great. And it was outstanding. I also had, just to be clear, I did have healthy stuff. I had a side of beans. So I did felt like I was like, oh, okay. Heart healthy, I'm told.
Pinto beans?
Pinto beans,
of course.
Yeah. Although I wasn't, I was expecting, I didn't know what to expect when I ordered the pinto beans, because sometimes it is literally just pinto beans, and that's kind of lame.
Yeah.
This one was actually in a nice sauce and stuff like that. I was like...
Did it have bacon in it?
Actually, it did.
Of course.
It did. And I was very happy about that.
So, extra healthy.
Yes. So healthy. I drank more water because I was sick. Actually, I was sick before I left, and much credit to Nicole Kiefer, the executive director at Vitality, who basically ordered me to urgent care. And ordinarily, I get sick like 4 times a year, and ordinarily I do not go. I just kind of deal with it and
at work. You
deal
with it at work.
Make all of my colleagues suffer.
Thank you.
Well, Nicole Kiefer, because I was traveling, I was like, oh man, that's gonna be no fun. She's like, go to urgent care. You never know. They'll give you stuff. They'll just, at the very least, they'll make you feel better. So I went, and I gotta say, thank you to Inspira Urgent Care in Mantua, who gave me a Z-Pack and some steroids and a couple other odds and ends, and said, okay, this will definitely make you feel better. Go down and enjoy yourself. I gotta tell you, I felt great. I highly recommend steroids. Because seriously, kids.
And there it is.
It was
the day that Talking Catholic ends. That is Mike Walsh's quote going out.
There you go. I'm gonna go further. Nicole Kiefer told me. No, just kidding.
No.
Making sure that I went to urgent care.
It's called a Z-Pack.
It is. Yeah. No, I did Z-Pack, but I also did the steroids. Those
Second
are two different things.
Second quote.
And then lots of no, just kidding. But I got to tell you, and this is something Nicole and I talked about on Tuesday, because she asked how I was doing after everything. And I really did feel great down there. She was like, yeah, I don't know why people don't go to urgent care more often. And I was like, I don't know why I don't go to urgent care more often either. And she, being a medical professional, was like, yeah, it's the stupidest decision ever that people don't go. So can I write an article for the Catholic Star Herald explaining to people why they should go to urgent care when they're not feeling well and what the benefits of that are? And I said, yeah. I think you should.
Wait, you keep telling people, specifically Nicole, to write columns for the Catholic Star Herald, and then I found out like 2 hours before deadline, oh, here's a column. Can you also tell your editor of the Catholic Star Herald, I'm totally on board with it, by the way, if I could just get a little bit more heads up.
You know what it is?
It's
not, well, that's not going to happen. Also, it's not that I just don't expect people to listen to me when I tell them to write stuff, and Kiefer actually does. And I have an appreciation for that.
Good point.
Yeah, everyone else just ignores me.
That's true.
I asked Donna to write something.
Hey, she did.
She did.
You asked me to write something my very first week here, and I still never wrote it, because I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Is that the Women in Catholic Leadership one?
Yeah, that's it.
I'm still waiting on that one,
yeah,
to be honest with you.
Anyway, so that was a good trip. And
it was a very good trip.
We're happy that you had a good time. I'm very happy that you had a good time eating. That actually meant a lot to me.
Yeah, I had Tex-Mex while I was down there, too.
Excellent.
It was good. Had Whataburger while I was down there. So just try to make it all as,
Yeah.
And I don't think we walked so much, I don't think I came back any fatter.
No, it's a good place to walk.
Yeah. You know the one thing I didn't do while I was down there? Yeah, go to church. We were so overbooked that I was not able to. And genuinely, I really wanted to go to church while I was down in Texas, because I keep hearing about how it's exploding all over the place in terms of, population and how many people are attending and stuff. So much so that they're like reaching out to dioceses in the north to literally buy churches and ship them down whole.
What?
Or at least in parts. Oh, yeah, absolutely. We've had requests for that. In the Diocese of Camden, we have had requests for some of our now closed churches to literally buy them, pick them up, and take them down to
next
Texas
time you get a call, tell them to go to Marketplace on Facebook, because I literally have seen that in the last couple weeks.
People are selling churches on Facebook Marketplace?
Yes, they are. I mean, they're actually selling the
This is now starting to feel like conspiracy theory talk.
No, I saw it and I was like, what the? And I was like, is that allowed? Yeah, true story.
Look at that.
Next time I see it, I'll send you I'll send you the link so you
I might want to buy it. Who knows?
So, speaking about bringing it back to the diocese, what's going on in the diocese?
Oh man, we're gearing up for busy time again. So Advent is so close, and I actually forgot. I didn't realize how close it was. First of all, I didn't realize how late Thanksgiving was this year.
Yes.
It's literally the last Thursday in November.
I will be in
Ironically,
you'll
be in Arlington.
The only words that wanted to come out was Thanksgiving and turkey. So I will be in Arlington for Thanksgiving.
Well, it starts with a T. Texas, that is. Yes, you'll be down there. I will be. I found out that we're doing Friday Thanksgiving with my in-laws because all the kids will be back. So I'm very excited about that. We're actually having Thanksgiving celebration in this building. As a matter of fact, once again, Kiefer came up with the idea of doing a pastoral center Thanksgiving lunch. I guess I'm going to bake for that. I'm going to bake breads and or a dessert. I haven't decided what yet, though.
Will you stay for the actual celebrations, though? Or are you doing a drop-off?
That doesn't sound like something I would do.
I know. I'm seeing if I can put you on the spot. Like you would care.
Number one, I wouldn't care. Number two, I don't want to, but I will bring my baked goods.
Good.
And I will make an appearance.
Oh, all right.
Whether
that
I
counts.
sit at the table is a different story.
No, I don't expect you to sit.
Don't
it was
hold
more
your
of a
breath.
hover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At best. But yeah, so sort of preparing, so I was talking to Carrie about doing an Advent episode in the beginning of December, so excited about that. I'm actually going to be heading south again in December, going to the Catholic Charities USA's AID. They refuse to refer to it as a conference. I don't know what the heck to call it. AID. I don't know what to call it. I'm going to an AID, not a conference,
right?
Down in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I'm excited about that.
It talks about disaster.
It's all about disaster
response.
preparedness. Yeah,
Okay.
And I'll be doing stuff on crisis communication, so that's fun. So it is a very busy time, very exciting, very busy time. We actually had a big event this past weekend, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. We had Man Up, we had another nice turnout, and yeah, it's a busy time in the diocese.
And if you pick up not this week, what's the date next week? 22nd? Issue of the Catholic Star Herald, speaking about Carrie Janice, we're going to have an article about all of the Catholic campus ministries because they all got together recently at Rowan, and it was Rowan, Stockton, and then 3 schools from Rutgers Camden, Rutgers New Brunswick, and Montclair. And all of these young people came together from all the different Newman clubs and all got together for like a night of faith. And I think that's pretty cool.
Awesome. That's very awesome.
So we're doing a story about it.
That actually reminds me. I follow all of the social media accounts for our Catholic campus ministries, and I see that they bring in people to talk to them all the time. How come they never bring us in to talk?
I think we know the answer to that.
Oh.
Remember your quote from about two minutes ago? About your Z-Pack and other assorted drugs.
So what you're saying is I wouldn't be a good influence on Catholic
maybe
college students?
But you would be for crisis communications.
Yeah.
And you could bring baked goods, which they would love.
That's what I'm saying.
Feed a college student.
I like to feed people, and I like to pontificate on the things I know a lot about, and some things I don't know a lot about.
Most things, yeah.
So
Kidding.
just telling Brittany and Carrie and whoever runs the one at Rutgers, you guys can invite us to do a presentation. Well, we'll do a live recording of the podcast while we're there.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. We'd have the kids on, stuff like that. It'd be fun.
And before we introduce our guest, which is I wanted to throw out there, since we are talking about the 22nd issue and the one after that, we are going to be having a feature about what you are thankful for. So if you're interested in participating and having your thoughts put in the newspaper, what you're thankful for this year, I'm going to do like a little roundup of people's quotes.
That's
and
nice.
Throw it in the paper. So
how long do you want them to be?
Like a paragraph.
Okay.
Throw me a paragraph about what you're thankful for this year, and email it to jennifer.morrow@camdendiocese.org. And yes, I did look down just to check my email address. And so give me a shout. Tell me your name, first and last name, and your parish, and a paragraph of what you're thankful for this year, and it'll probably get in the paper.
That's cool. How are you notifying people to do this?
Well, now I did it.
I'm
going to put it up on social media.
Oh, okay.
Yep. I'm going to do that maybe today. It's a big day of meetings, so we'll see. If I can get it out today, maybe I'll get Andrea to help me.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, if anyone's wondering, I have a new staff member that we will have on the podcast at some point. Andrea, she's our new content creator. We haven't referenced her on the podcast yet, so
She's
since
awesome.
you did,
She's
she
a
is
real
awesome.
go-getter. She's has a lot of initiative, which I love. And because she's bilingual, she helps a lot with the Catholic Star Herald and get some new Spanish news in.
Yeah, she really does help us turn things around in that regard. She's also a good videographer, and so we're very happy about that. She's Peruvian, which is lovely. So anyway, yeah, good stuff.
All right. I think we talked enough.
Yeah, well, actually, I think we may have overdid it.
I did. We can just cut some of this out.
That never happens.
So I wanted to introduce our guest who's been patient. Thank you very much. We have with us today Thomas Hickey, and he is a director of the Falco, Caruso, and Leonard funeral homes in Pennsauken and Camden.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here in the vault with you guys. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I already mentioned the vault, so already you're welcome
I'm
back.
fascinated by the vault.
Oh, listen, as soon as he came in, he's like, oh my, you weren't kidding. It really is a vault.
I know.
He listened to a couple of the episodes.
Yeah.
It's fascinating,
Yeah,
isn't it?
neat,
Yeah. I still don't know why it's here. Yeah, we'll talk about that in other words. So yeah,
I
we
have
have
mentioned that multiple
I
times
know.
why there's a vault in this building.
So, Mike, let the listeners know why Thomas is on the podcast today.
So there's two reasons he's on the podcast today. Number one, as you well know, this is the month of November, and this is when the Catholic Church really focuses on the dead and how we remember the dead and how we honor the dead as part of our faith. It's literally an integral part of our faith. So we thought it would be a good idea to have a gosh darn funeral director on as well. Now, the irony is I actually know a lot of funeral directors because I grew up next to a funeral home. I grew up next to Barclay Funeral Home in Clayton, New Jersey. I've known the Barclays my entire life. They're great people. The funeral home has spooked me since I was, for the last 52 years, actually. I've seen a lot of viewings over there. My father's helped move some bodies from time to time when Mr. Barkley didn't have enough hands around. Oh yeah, it was a great. And my dad does not enjoy stuff like that. So the fact that tells you what a good neighbor my dad is, that he would go over and give a hand. But yeah, I've been around viewings and stuff like that. The irony, of course, being I go out of my way to avoid viewings and funerals if at all possible.
Indeed.
So because I am so bad at handling death. That's really why we wanted to have you on, because you're someone who decided to lean into it, Thomas, and say, not only do I want to, I have a vocation to help the dead. So are you helping the dead or are you helping the families?
First and foremost, I would say the families is who we help. We have a common refrain when we're in funeral school and when we're learning how to become a funeral director, in that funerals are for the living. And that's an important thing that you can never forget, that here at the end of the day, our purpose is to primarily bring comfort to those who have lost somebody. And of course, we also care for the dead as well, as sort of that other secondary, same half of this, coin.
Yeah.
Way to do it.
So what interested you in this field? I mean, I have to believe there are not a ton of funeral directors. Well, actually, I take that back. There's a lot of funeral directors. But walking amongst us, there's probably not a lot of funeral directors. What was it that sort of brought you to this vocation?
So it's an interesting, not interesting story.
Those are best kinds.
Like you had mentioned, you grew up next to a funeral home, right? So one of my friends from the town that I'm originally from, his family owns a funeral home back there. And I used to work with him at our local McDonald's, the Sun, when I was in high school. And we used to just spend time over at the funeral home after we were done working, just hanging out. I got along with this old man. I'd help him garden and do other little things like that. He never let me do a removal, or a transfer, what we call it, when you pick up the deceased, until a little later on, when I was in my college years. But it was one of those things that I didn't originally go to school for it. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life after I got my bachelor's. And this is why I call it a calling, because I could not get images of the funeral home out of my mind, or how my friend's old man lived his life. I said, this is a guy who's got it figured out. He might seem tired and stressed out sometimes, but this is a guy who lives with purpose and derives enjoyment from his living. So.
And I have to think that you're with people in some of the darkest days that they
Sure.
have. And so to be called to say, I want to walk with them and help them. How does a funeral director, like you said, kind of help make their lives easier at a difficult time?
Sure. Well, most practically speaking, we take care of the behind-the-scenes details that many people don't realize how much actually goes into planning a funeral, whether or not it's a religious service or not. Even totally secular services have so much to figure out and so much to do, and we're often constricted by a tight time frame. So our biggest thing is making things easier on the family, and giving them an idea of what they have to do, what they have to bring, and making it really clear. And I don't want to say idiot-proof because that sounds negative, but like you want to dumb it down. You want to make it so it's able to be understood by everybody, the whole process. So you want to educate them first and foremost, and also make things convenient for them, to put it in a way. Yeah.
And I have to imagine that can be difficult. 'Cause the turnaround times on funerals, I mean, that's pretty quick. Most people don't think about it beforehand, particularly if
Sure.
it's a sudden death. I mean, that's usually less than a week, right?
Typically, yes, that would be the ideal, rather, because it's never good to stretch things out too long, too. I think that's, not good on a healing level, too, and practically it can get a little inconvenient when you stretch out the timeline too much. But yeah, we have to, in school they taught us we would turn things around in 36 to 48 hours, but it's
Wow.
never practical.
Wow.
Of course, there are some faiths where they have to take care of a final disposition within a very tight time frame, but we don't deal with a whole lot of that at our funeral home. We got to rock and roll from the moment that phone rings. We got to make sure we're on point, and we got to stay on top of the family, make sure they're hitting their marks and hitting their deadlines, and making things easy for them and seeing it through. Yeah.
Is it I've never really known this. Now, because I lived across from a funeral home, I did see things happening sort of all hours of the day and
Sure.
night. Is it kind of a 24/7 kind of job?
It is a life. It is
Wow.
not a job.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, late night, early morning call can happen at any time, and suddenly you're on the move, huh?
Absolutely. And we're really fortunate at our funeral home to have enough staff to really spread things around. But like I said, we have a number of funeral directors. So each night of the week, we have an on-call rotation to answer the business line. And, if a death occurs in a residence, like when I'm on call, I like to go myself just because I think it's important that the family sees the director in that first moment, and I can answer any questions for them and really touch base with them in a healthy way from the start. And then we also have part-time guys that are sort of not on standby, but they know if we're calling them in the middle of the night, we've got some work to do. So get moving. Yeah.
Wow.
Now, that's the second time we've talked about it being a calling. I mean, you want to go because you feel like you have to be there for them.
Yes, entirely. Yeah.
So what's the process like to become a funeral director?
So it's different every state, so I guess I'll preface it with that. But in New Jersey specifically, you have to go to and complete mortuary school, which is, I went to the mortuary program at Mercer County Community College, which I think is technically in West Windsor, but I always call the whole area Trenton or Ewing or whatever. And there was another one in North Jersey. I can't recall the name off the top of my head right now. But you have to go there. You have to complete the education. You have to take a state licensing exam and a 2-part national exam, as well as have a school embalming observation where someone from the school watches you embalm once you learn it, and then actually a state representative from the State Board of Funeral, or of Mortuary Science, rather, I should say, comes in to observe you as well. So there's a lot of scrutiny that goes into the licensure process. And you also have to do an internship. Like I was an intern for 2 years before I was a funeral director, where I think they actually just changed the requirements recently within the last year or two. I got to read up on that. But when I was in, it was 25 funerals, 25 sets of arrangements, and 75 embalmings.
Wow.
You had to have, and you have your preceptor, or master to an apprentice, sign off on all that stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
There's a whole process.
Would you, what would be interesting, Jen?
Yes.
Wouldn't you like to, if there was a way to make this happen, wouldn't you like to be there and like do a 24 hours in the life of a funeral home where you could actually, like, you yourself could actually be there and sort of like report on what it's like? Maybe go to an embalming and take part, maybe.
No.
Okay.
But my sister always wanted to be a mortician.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And there was something that she felt, she didn't end up going that way, but to this day she says that was one of the things she always wanted to do, is that she felt kind of called to that as well.
I asked Mr. Barkley when I was in college, maybe just after college, I was looking for work. I asked him, I said, hey, listen, I was a photographer, and I said, hey, are there any openings for like forensic photographer? Someone go to, he says, you don't want that job. I go, what do you mean I don't want that job? He goes, Mike, it's a whole lot of car accidents where literally there's a body smeared across a guardrail or something like that. And I went, you know what?
Yeah.
Maybe that's not my calling. All right.
Yeah, it's just that I don't do well with death. So
Sure.
I know that that would not be a calling for me. But the fact that you are willingly putting yourself into these situations to walk with them. And then also, when you're talking about school, there's the added component that you have to learn. You just came into the Catholic faith in the spring, right? Which we'll talk about. But you have to learn different faith traditions, I'm sure, as well, right?
Yes. We don't get into as much detail as I would have liked, because I'm sort of a social studies, history kind of nerd. Like, that's the kind of stuff I always leaned into when we were coming to it in school. But yeah, we had like a quick overview of, Orthodox traditions, like Christian Orthodox, Jewish traditions, Muslim traditions, Buddhist traditions, and of course, different Christian denominations, how they do it as well. Of course, we always focused on the Mass of Christian Burial being at a primarily sort of Catholic-leaning funeral home, though we serve all faiths. But yeah, it was always really neat stuff. Yeah.
Part of the Month of Remembrance is an opportunity, I think, also to educate. I'll just talk about Catholics, since it's a Catholic podcast, about the what do we say, the church teachings when it comes to burial. Is that something that you know about or can talk about a little bit?
Maybe I can't speak about it as an authority, not being an employee of the diocese or the church. But I could say my professional understanding of it is that, and you hear this kind of stuff from like sort of your older generation of Catholics, that they're like still not all on board with the idea of cremation and things like that. But if you talk to funeral directors, you'll learn that that's sort of the trend that the whole country is going down, is that people are starting to drift more towards cremation than full body burial. And that's fine, especially for Catholics, because the Catholic Church said, yes, you can be cremated, but there are some little nuances, like you should keep the cremated remains altogether. I would think that it would be preferential to be in a Catholic cemetery, though I don't know if that's specifically required, but they do want you to be buried if you are still cremated. Like, you should ultimately be placed in a cemetery. Yeah.
No. If you're a Catholic, I can speak to this one because we've had Father Rocks on to talk about this.
Oh, yeah.
The chancellor of the diocese. Yeah. No splitting the ashes, and no leaving grandma and grandpa on the mantelpiece. You're supposed to be either, you can be buried or you can be put into a
niche for a cremation.
Right? Or a cremation.
I wonder if you can be, how like some churches, they'll have a memorial garden on church grounds, and then sometimes cremains go there. Is that allowed?
That's a great question.
That is a great question. I believe, you know what? I would not want to speak as an authority on whether or not that is allowed, but it is definitely worth a conversation with someone who would know more than me.
I'm going to have to look into that.
Yeah. Why? Does somebody want to put in some church somewhere?
No. I recently discovered that, I don't want to, if it's not allowed, I don't want to call it out. But
just don't tell the people whose names so the police don't show up.
Okay. A church is creating a memorial garden, and cremains are part of the idea is that it would be a place for parishioners to be buried there as well, because this church does not have its own cemetery. Of course, there's other Catholic cemeteries. Sure. And I considered, would I want to do that? But I don't even know if I'd want to, but I just.
Well, it's interesting because I know there's a lot of discussion right now because there's a new wave of burial coming, which is sort of a back to the earth style burial where you literally go into the ground
right.
and you're into like some like flower bed or something like that. I know the Catholic Church has sort of had that discussion about it. There's an environmental reason why it's good. There's an environmental reason why it has to be done correctly. But it is something you definitely want to talk to your parish priest about if that's something you're thinking about, because I know there are limitations as to what Catholics can do in terms of that sort of a back to the earth kind of thing. Okay. But it too is a trend.
Yeah.
It also raises practical questions for how to actually celebrate the funeral mass. That was the first thing I thought of, because we don't see a whole lot of that interest in the green burial movement. You hear, people talking about it from time to time, but we haven't really dealt with that professionally. But if they're not using a traditional casket, if they're not doing this or that, what are they going to be placed in when you go to mass? How is that all going to work out? So it's more than just more than just rules from the priests for how to proceed, but just like how is it going to affect everything along the process, and what can you do to,
That's why you do this and we do not.
Yeah,
that's right.
So what do you think that some of the, maybe not misconceptions, but what do people, including myself, not know about how to prepare? Like how can we better prepare? Like for instance, my husband and I have a will, but that is because my husband was in the military and we had to. Like what can people do to make the process easier for their loved ones or for themselves on their loved ones?
I would say the best thing to do is to first, at home, make sure you're all comfortable talking about it and be ready to have these conversations and to, sit down and go, hey, this is going to be some details to figure out. We got to dedicate some time, sit down together and figure out what we want to do, how we want it to look. The second thing I would say is that once you're comfortable, you and your family talking about it, call the funeral home that you're interested in going with and see if you could come in to sit for what's called pre-arrangements, because we can actually write up a whole funeral in advance. And really, we'll show you all the options, we'll show you all the caskets and everything that we could offer, and we'll write it up according to today's price list. Because I should say, before discussing anything funeral related, that everything that we offer comes from what's called a general price list. That's an item-by-item description of everything, all goods and services that go into planning a funeral. A little joke for the other funeral directors, if any of them are listening. It's called the statement. We have to give it when we're ever talking to client families, like right before we get into brass tacks.
Hey, listen, business is a business.
Yep. Inside jokes out there, everybody. I love it.
But yeah, you could come in and make pre-arrangements. We have a couple directors that are really nice and patient and friendly and will help you sort of plan it out in detail. And you could be as detailed as you want or as not detailed as you want. You could say, I know I want a blue casket. That's all I want. Figure the rest out. And they'll be like, okay, fine. We'll figure the rest out. Or you could know specifically what you want, what prayer you want on your card, and, how long you want your viewing and what church you want to go to. We could figure that all out ahead of time. Yeah.
I actually didn't realize that. To me, the idea that I have a will, I feel like I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
But everything else, I didn't know.
Wills can be tricky, and I'm not an expert to talk about this, so take this with a couple grains of salt. But wills aren't really looked at until after the funeral a lot of times.
Yeah.
Okay, so if your wishes are only in your will, sometimes your family's still left kind of guessing what it is you want to do, especially if they don't have that in writing in front of them.
Even if that includes the burial information?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because it's not till after the disposition occurs that most people go to get the will and estate probated. So that's when it actually gets opened up and looked at.
I will say that, to your point, my in-laws have it all figured out.
Perfect.
They have for years now. We know what it's going to be, where it's going to be, what it has to be a part of. And I got to say, it is nice to know that all that stuff is taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
My parents are the same way. My dad and my stepmom, they used to go to Mexico every year. And, when you go to Mexico, you leave at 4 a.m. sometimes. I would get the call every year at around 4:30 or 5 from my dad. Jen, we're getting on the plane. If the plane goes down, contact so-and-so. He has all the information. Love you, honey. Click.
Oh, that's so funny.
And then I'd be awake because I'd be like, oh my gosh. And then you just lay there waiting till they land.
That's funny. It makes me think of a joke, because I'm a bit of a jokester behind closed doors. It makes me think of something I say whenever I'm going to a really difficult or weird situation to my coworkers. I haven't made my own pre-arrangements, but I'm dying to. No pun intended. But I always say, if I don't come back, the suit, you know what suit I'm talking about. It's in my closet. You know exactly where.
See, for me, it was because my parents still live across from the Barclay Funeral Home. It's like, all right, I gotta go talk to the neighbors. Although the irony is, now I could be mistaken, but I seem to recall my parents, who are actually very close friends to the Barclays. Usually, funeral directors won't do the families that they know really well, like friends of the family and stuff like that. I always got the impression that when someone the Barclays knew passed, they would pass it on to a friendly funeral home to actually take care of the arrangements. Yeah.
I would disagree with that. And I don't mean to be combative. But I love the opportunity to serve family and friends.
Really?
Sure, it can feel a little awkward at first because you're so used to seeing them only in that other dimension of your life, that personal way. But there's no greater honor or privilege than being able to take care of someone you love.
No, I love that.
Like that.
That's very nice.
Like I did the services for my grandmother when she passed. I was an intern when we all, were with her when she passed at Temple Hospital. And I was really fortunate to know how to embalm at that point. So I was allowed to, literally care for the woman who bore my father in one of the most intimate ways that you could almost never imagine.
Yeah, sure.
And I've handled the cremation of my uncle. And, we've had plenty of friends and other things come through the funeral home, people we know dearly, and we're always happy to serve them. Yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm. There is some truth to that, and this is where it's something I'll agree with Thomas in this regard. I do think families have lost, just because of the way modern times has happened. Families have lost the understanding and how to care for other family members, particularly as they sort of, migrate towards the end. And the difficulty, the psychological difficulty, it's back in the day, you cared for everyone was in the same house. So you kind of cared for everybody, and, the troubles that they felt, you were the person to help with them. There wasn't a service that you brought in or something like that. And I'm not saying that that's good or bad. I'm just saying I think it was more familiar to families to care for people, and actually to hear something like that, I think that's wonderful. It's actually
quite beautiful, actually, the way you said it.
Oh, thank you.
It was very poetic the way you said it. It was nice. So that kind of leads into you did come into the Catholic Church in the spring,
yes.
Right? And your parish is
the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception. Yep.
And so tell me where, first off, that journey, how did that come along? And then how does your faith journey and your job coincide, if they do? Sure.
It's been a while since I've thought about the genesis of all this, but I would have to say, so maybe I should rewind a little bit and start with that I was baptized Protestant, but not really brought up in the most religious of households. Belief in God or higher power was always sort of encouraged, but we were never brought to any particular church when we were younger. And it was through my work at the funeral home when I was an intern and, newly licensed, that we would, be going to funeral masses. We'd be going to plenty of other denominational churches. We've done plenty of Buddhists and stuff like that too. So we kind of get a nice sampling of all the faith traditions in the area. But there was just something about the Catholic Mass that just stood out to me. I have a very soft spot in my heart for beauty and grace and reverence and that sort of stuff. So in a Catholic Mass, that was the only place that I felt it. When I had experienced all the other different kinds. And it was actually a coworker of mine, one of our part-time helpers, who it actually became my madrina, mi querida madrina, Wanda Garcia. She's my godmother, who invited me to come with her to Mass at the cathedral back when Father Fisher was still here. And ever since then, I've been hooked. I just absolutely love it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
My mom was the same way. She grew up Protestant, and then when she sort of experienced the Catholic Mass, because there's so much rich tradition in it,
right.
She too is much like myself, a fan of pomp and circumstance.
Sure.
And there is something to be said for us Catholics. We know how to do something with a show.
Mm-hmm.
And then, how would you say that your job and your faith coincide? Especially when it just comes to the reverence and respect for others.
Sure, I think that really hits the nail on the head that when the faith and the profession intersect, it is first and foremost about reverence for God, reverence for the dead, and reverence for the families. And really being able to bring comfort to those who mourn. I'm getting a little tripped up trying to think of what else to say about it, but sometimes just the brevity of that sort of concept is enough.
I guess I was thinking about it too, because November, the beginning of November
Sure.
is also National Vocation Awareness Week, and our seminarians were out that first weekend giving a lot of talk about vocation, and they were speaking about their priestly vocation, of course. But part of their talks, for the most part, was also finding your personal vocation. If it's a priest, fantastic. But on the other hand, if you're called to be a mother or a father or an individual, just find your calling. And as somebody who worked in secular journalism for 20 years before I did Catholic, it wasn't until I did Catholic journalism that, to me, everything clicked like a puzzle piece. Like my vocation and my faith clicked, and now I'm at peace and where I'm at.
Yes. Yeah, I could say the same about myself, that it does really click. And once I finally entered the church and I had a full understanding of what the Mass really means and the sacrifice of the Mass and everything that goes into it, you do appreciate the universal connection of it all and how we live our ministry to serve the families. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some real truth to that.
Yeah.
And no, it's true because I was the same deal. I was in secular world for forever, and I come here, and it's like I make decisions based off of something other than money and success.
Right.
It's like we're serving the greater good here. Very similar to you. I mean, what I've always appreciated about your profession is the fact that while we talked earlier about how you've been able to use your vocation to help people most of the time the people you're working with are people you've never met before.
Total
they are
strangers,
100% total strangers that you have to create a rapport with very quickly. Is that something you're like? I'm sure that you've got a lot of technical training, but in working with the people, did you get training about that too?
Sort of on-the-fly training.
Okay.
That's like one of the great benefits of having that internship requirement to getting your license is that you get a chance to work at a funeral home. And yes, you have some guidance from the people who are more senior to you, the people who are really tutoring you along on how to interact with people. But a lot of times it's really, there's so many different personal communication styles. It's about just trying it out and not being afraid to make mistakes in conversation and figuring out what works,
Well, I asked that because I've had a lot of conversation with priests over the years who, handle sick calls and death calls and things like that. And I've just recently had this conversation with the Vicar General, Father Robert Hughes, and I remember asking him, what was it like, that first time? And what he finds is that most of the time priests have a sort of a natural, innate ability. Like one of the things that calls them to the priesthood is caring for others.
Sure.
And because they have that natural inclination to care for others, they tend to be very good with working with people who are in distress, Prior to becoming a funeral director, did you find yourself having sort of that nature that you were comfortable working with people who were in crisis or talking to people who were in crisis?
Sure. There's one specific thing personally that if you'll excuse me, I won't go into tremendous detail because it's a little private.
Sure.
Dealing with my twin brother. He's had, not the easiest life, and I think that was one of the first things that got me ready for it, was being there for him, even if I ended up not really helping him in the end.
Sure.
Just being able to be like the most forgiving person to him in really difficult moments when nobody else could.
Yeah.
Even though it's not exactly the same thing, it was still a hard moment in his life, and I felt like I had to be there for him. Not just because he was my brother, but
No, I don't necessarily think that that's something that's innate with most people. As someone who does not have that ability, as has been well documented, I do think that there is something special about people who can work with people in crisis and be there as a guiding voice, a comforting voice. And to finish that conversation I had with Father Hughes, he did say that there are priests that actually don't do well with that they literally have to be trained up with that because it's just not something that they had a different mindset as they were entering the priesthood, and they didn't have that natural inclination to help people in crisis. And not that they're bad priests or anything like that, it's just not in their skill set where they do need to be trained up. But it sounds like you, and I suspect, much like yourself, that it comes from personal interaction in their youth and their formative years that help them to have that ability.
Sure.
Sadly, I didn't really have many crises in my youth, so I didn't develop a taste for that. So I don't know how to care about people's feelings.
Stop.
Nor do I want to.
But you brought up a good... What? Nor do I want to.
It's true.
This podcast is full of gems. Clips. Communication styles. That's something that you mentioned just now. I mean, we all communicate differently, and you're learning to communicate with somebody in a very short amount of time. Like, how do you just kind of pick up on a vibe of like, okay, this person might be more closed or open, or? Yes,
that's sort of like the first instinct you have to get a feel for is, and I should say before going into more detail, usually the first time we hear from a family we're dealing with is over the phone, and like Mike had said, they're complete strangers typically. They'd never talked to us before. I've never talked to them. And they could be very emotional. They could be very almost manic and panicked because they think they have to do all this stuff and they're not sure. And it's about reading them sort of as you're first starting that conversation, going, okay, let me slow this conversation down. Let me bring the tone of it all down, see if we can get them to calm. And of course, always asking for permission to talk about certain things that might make them uncomfortable, just making sure they're ready to move forward too, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It does.
It does.
Which is, so while I don't care about people's feelings, I do crisis communication all the time, and that is exactly the number one role of a crisis communicator or anybody who's dealing with crisis, is settling everything down, being the goat in the room, trying to kind of... just occurs to me, most people won't get that reference. When you have high-strung stallions, occasionally one of the ways of helping a high-strung stallion is you put a goat in the stall rather, and that helps stallions relax before a race and stuff like that. If anyone's wondering, I am the goat in this reference, not the stallion. But that's what the job of people like us is to calm everyone, because we know what's going to happen, right? And we understand what's going to lay it out. Not everything, but we understand how this is probably going to go, and all we need to do is calm them down so they can make rational decisions. So that sounds to me like, in that regard, that's really what you're doing at the very beginning, is helping people make rational decisions, which, to your point earlier, is why it's so good to have these things done early, not because of impending doom necessarily, but because you just have all your ducks in a row for the benefit of your family.
Absolutely. I don't want to just keep pitching prearrangement to people, till I'm red in the face, but like, if you are comfortable having that conversation with your family and going into the funeral home, please do it. Yeah. You will save your family, spare them from what could be an agonizing, chaotic experience. Not to say that the agony or chaos comes from anything involved with, the funeral home or anything like that, but it's, death is profound. Sure. Grief is profound. This is, a lot of people don't even think about this every day, let alone imagine it happening to them. Yeah.
Except for Jen's stepfather, of course. Or father.
Oh, my dad? Yeah.
So...
they're smart. That's really what it...
you have to, I almost lost my train of thought.
That's
We're talking
okay.
about death being profound,
But
grief
it
being
is.
profound. Yeah.
You're right. It's a profound experience. It's going to be overwhelming when it happens.
That's it. Yeah, it's overwhelming. So we want to make it whelming. We want to, bring it to a sense of calm and really help them go through it. And when people have prearrangements figured out beforehand, that's a totally different type of phone call.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm talking the difference between someone almost sounding panicked, like they just ran down 3 flights of steps and they lost their wallet on the way, to, someone saying, oh yeah, mom just died and you might remember me. I was there 6 months ago and we have everything figured out and hospice is ready for you guys to come on down. So, if you guys could start to head out, and it's as simple as that. And then,
Wow.
Usually like you'll go to the house and you'll bring the file with you of the prearrangements and you'll say, hey, we're still kind of thinking we're proceeding along this course, and it's just a whole lot easier on everybody at the end. Yeah.
It's not a matter of being formative or anything like that. It's literally just, making sure. It's like how you would prepare for literally anything else.
Yep.
For instance, like my vacation. We lots of preparations for the vacation. Why wouldn't you prepare for your final vacation?
Mm-hmm.
That's
I'm
right.
just thinking.
I tell you right. I call death the final
They
vacation.
did. I was just thinking, like I was saying, because my parents, they've had it wrapped up for quite a while. My mom, I had a conversation with her after my grandmother passed, because it was very chaotic. Though it shouldn't have been, because she was sick her entire life, but nobody still planned for it. So, I've been trying to talk to my mom. My mom doesn't want to talk about it. But now, her way of talking about it is that she's getting everything together she doesn't want and selling everything on Marketplace.
Oh, that happens,
And
yeah.
she's like, I'm selling everything. And my mom's not sick, by the way. She's healthy and she's great. She was just like, I don't want you to have to do this. I was like, Mom, it's going in the trash. So, and by the way, the stuff she's selling are like my baby clothes. So it's a long time.
Wow.
I know. Yes. So if you need to go to Arlington and you need baby clothes, call my mom. If you want great places, call Uncle Dan.
Okay. This is important information.
But I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
that's as far as we can get with this conversation when I talk to my mom.
And that's funny. That's almost a universal concept when it comes to people approaching mortality, like as a concept. I can't remember what it's exactly called, but it makes me think of a YouTube rabbit hole I went down when I was trying to figure out a new way to organize my closet. That there's something called like death cleaning in like Swedish or Danish or Northern European culture, where like, I don't know how universal the tradition is, but a great number of these people, as they get older, they just sell off their stuff, and the family's like all there for it, helping them sell it, because they don't want to wait until they're grieving to have to clear house.
Northern Europeans, very efficient.
Practical people.
Yeah.
And
Much
Arlington,
like IKEA.
Texas moms.
That's right.
Much like IKEA.
So we're about to wrap up. We only have a few minutes left, but I was reading your bio.
Okay.
And so, as you know, I grew up next to his funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading your bio, and at the end of your bio, it says you live in an apartment above the funeral home.
Yes, I do. Yep.
Now, growing up, the siblings or the offspring of the Barclays lived in an apartment above the Barclay funeral home. How long did it take to get used to that? Or was it not even something you had to...
Wasn't even a thing, and I have another joke to come along with this. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're not, so you have to excuse me. But very often,
All right.
when I tell people I live at the funeral home, whether they're a guest at a funeral or just somebody I'm meeting at some other totally unrelated thing, they'll be like, wow, like, aren't you scared? Like, don't you hear noises or feel a chill on your neck or anything like that? And I'm like, well, first off, why would they haunt me? I didn't do nothing to them. If you're to believe in these things, why
Excellent
would
point.
they haunt me? Think of it more like a hotel, okay? They're just, they're just stopping by. They'll
You know
haunt
what?
you at home. They're not bothering me.
You know what?
So true.
I'm on board with this
Yeah.
now. All this time I've been fearful. I never should have been afraid.
Should have been afraid for yourself. That's what they're coming back to.
If
That's
anything, if they're
funny.
stopping by, they're patting me on the back for taking care of them. That's all.
You know what? Wow,
Good room service.
this has completely altered my viewpoint on my my childhood neighbor. They were very sane, I will say, and they had a really cool pool. We used to love hanging out at the Barclays house.
There's a pool at the funeral home?
Well, because
A lot of people have a little pool. Yeah.
yeah, well,
I don't. I would love one, but yeah, a lot of people do.
You have to think of it as a campus. So the funeral home was one building, and then their home
Right.
was the other building, and there was an apartment over the funeral home, and behind their home was the pool and the motor home.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, they had a great life. The Barcleys did. They had great
nice.
parties too. It was like fun.
I bet.
I was the
I bet.
Yeah, I bet.
Seriously, I was the bartender at one of their parties once. Oh, it was the best.
Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed having you on the podcast, Thomas. This actually might be one of my favorites. I feel
thank
like
you
I
kindly.
learned a lot.
Yeah.
And
I hope
Thomas
the
has a
listeners
skill
did.
that I do not, which is brevity, can't even pronounce it, and passion.
Yeah.
I always have to say 20 words to say what I'm trying to say, but you were so well spoken, and I'm going to try to copy that.
Oh, thank you
Yeah,
so
I'm not going
much.
to hold my breath.
Listeners know I have a really just
Yeah.
tugboats. That's all I have to
I
say
know.
to
We're
that.
trying, to the point where we're trying to wrap up this podcast, and we're now 15 seconds over because we won't stop talking.
See? Thank you for being on the show,
Thank you.
Thomas.
I wish we had more time to talk. I love
Me
these
too.
kind of
Oh, we'll have you back
conversations.
again. Don't
Yeah,
you worry.
that'd be great.
Yeah,
Thanks
reach
a lot,
out
Tom.
anytime.
And to our listeners, thanks again for joining us, and we'll be back again next week. See you, everybody.